Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. Today we're finally doing the Flagbearer Glaciela character review, and yes, all in one part. Thank you so much for your feedback the other day. I obviously want to cater these videos to what best serves you all, and so one part it is. I'm going to cover all the same topics listed here. We're going to do the total stats and base stats first, then look at the class job overview, put them together to get our general thoughts, and then finally some of the optimization once you start building her out. Now, from the character overview, brand new wind unit, they've given her the Resolute Flagbearer main job as a unique 100 cost main job for her. She does have the Trick Lancer and Nightblade Subs as well, with a spear for equipment as well as hat cloth and accessory, move of 3 and jump of 1. Now from a resistance standpoint, she does start out very strong. 15% here to slash, 10% to missile and magic. Those are the 3 most popular types in global at the moment. Neutral at 0% to pierce and only 5% negative to strike. So overall, really strong starting point. This is really important for her bulkiness overall. From a status element perspective, she is a 50 faith unit, not a 97 faith unit, so you don't have to worry terribly about some of these, but the 50% to stun I actually like a lot. That is a more underratedly common one. The Berserk is nice, but not necessarily one to be mindful of from a meta perspective, and the 10% to petrification is basically negligible. Either way, could be a lot worse, nothing to worry about here. Now from a base stat perspective, this is out of 121 total characters. She does skew on the higher side for base HP, at least from a damage dealing perspective. And if you're looking around what some of her company is here, you can see Oberyn, Orin, Velric, Astria, some of those bulkier damage dealers that she does fall within that range, right under where the rest of the tanks typically fall at the top of the list. So overall, good starting point. From an attack perspective, she is the new highest base attack character in the game. Now, it's not terribly material comparing her first to second place. Doesn't make that big of a difference. Just all you have to remember is that she has a very high base attack. So any attack scaling things are going to very much help her get her attack stat up. Now we look at the agility wise. She falls a little bit more to the middle of the pack here. 48 out of the 121. 58 agility though is still relatively on the medium side of things. So, you know, not going to speed by anybody or be lapping a lot of enemies, but she can at least keep competitive with many of the turn rotations. She will easily be over that 100 agility mark, which you want. From a dexterity perspective, she does skew a little bit higher on the base dexterity side of things. The board will kind of neuter this just a little bit, but overall base dexterity in a good spot as well. Same can be said for luck, where she does skew a little bit on the higher average of things. So when we look at her all together, the total stat, or the base stats at least, she does come in above average compared to where most units come. Now when it comes to the total stats, when we include the board, there are some actual interesting changes here where they do give her 10 agility on the board to kind of bump up her total agility compared to the UR units, and they actually skimp her a little bit on the dexterity stat so that she ends up with relatively less from that perspective. The rest of them, some ups, some downs, but nothing too crazy. Now we look at the crit and crit avoid. As we saw, the dexterity stat in total, it comes down a little bit, so she actually does end up on the slightly average to below average side of things, but she does have a passive which you will likely have equipped quite commonly, will jettison her critical hit rate a little more to that top third of the character list. So that's really an interesting way for them to potentially make up for that deficit in the dexterity rate. From a crit avoid perspective, she also skews a little bit higher, just from the luck perspective being a little bit higher. So nothing to really take away from, just to be generally aware of. From an accuracy standpoint, she is also the most accurate character in the game now due to 2 of her passives. So if we look at this blue line first and foremost, this is the total innate accuracy without passives, just the dexterity and luck. She does end up on the higher side of things, skews a little bit above the average, but once you start implementing those passives, there's 2 of them, one for 25% each, so 50%. She ends up being this top tier unit, and I'm not going to go through the chart here on the right. You're welcome to read through it if you want, but all you have to really know is that she's extremely accurate. I don't even know why I have this chart here if I'm not going to talk about it. The evasion standpoint, she is right on the bottom cusp of what you could potentially expect to evade a hit once in a while. Definitely not an evade unit though. Even if you build her for it, it's going to be few and far between. Now we get to the report card side of things. So effective HP overall, we did see she started with that higher overall base HP. It's some great weapon resist there. That she has a passive that also gives her 20 AoE resistance. No innate defense or spirit or any way to boost it. So that's one of the few weaknesses that she has, if you want to even call it that, because there are ways to still get around it. Does have a 50% general barrier though, which makes up for that. And her HP does skew higher. So net effect, she does have some decent survivability overall. She can certainly be exposed, don't get me wrong, but there's not a clear-cut way or a clear weakness to go after. Now the primary stat, definitely an A, could even be an A plus here, the highest base attack in the game. She's got a 30% wind imperil as well, which will amplify her damage. She also uses the pierce type, which is a little less commonly defended against, so in terms of damage expectations, she is going to skew much higher than you might typically get from an average DPS. Agility wise, she is a C, straight average, no way to tweak it in the kit or in the passives, nothing wrong with that. Accuracy-wise, I have to give her the A+ here, being the top tier in the game. The innate accuracy being a little bit above the average, but even having the flexibility of 2 different passives to still give her 25 accuracy each. From an evasion perspective, the C average, nothing wrong with that, but not an evade unit from what we consider in the balance of the game. Movement, I am going C+. She technically does have a ability on the sub job of her main job that will increase her move by 1, so it's not necessarily reliable to use, and I wouldn't recommend it, but it's there, so I'm going to bump it up to a C+. Passive-wise, I'm going an A. Very, very impactful passives. Sure, they could have added 1 or 2 that maybe enhances her bulk just a little bit, but overall, the couple that they've given her are really impactful. The counter ability is going A+ here. She has a general reflex ability, which, although has less value nowadays with the reduction counter that we see on a lot of equipment and enemies, still, at the end of the day, reflex is reflex, and she's got another one that's not bad either. Now, overall kit, I am going A+ here. A massive, massive amount of both PvP and PvE utility, and quite frankly, excellent damage potential and some good rainbow team opportunities as well, in my opinion, for a final grade of an A+. She is an exceptionally good character, legitimately no weaknesses in my opinion. And we're going to see that now as we continue to go through the rest of the character review that, yeah, she is a meta-defining unit, and she's going to be sticking around for quite some time, and you're going to see her to counter a fair amount of things that were formerly strong. Now, from the passive abilities that we were just talking about here, Tribute of the Bull is by far the best one. The 20 AoE resistance, the 40 defense penetration, the 25 accuracy. That's an incredible amount of things to put on one passive. Definite 2 thumbs up. At that point, it's really just a decision between Trick Lancer lore and Nightblade mastery. I personally prefer Trick Lancer lore for the crit rate of 25 and the extra defense penetration of 40. Might be a little overkill though. It's also helpful to have that extra attack of 30% and the accuracy 25. Really just matchup dependent on what you're expecting to see. And if you're seeing a very huge physical tank, then sure, go for the 80 defense penetration. If you're going more for the one-shot kill evasive units, yeah, go for the attack and accuracy then. Like, you can play with those. The Unwavering Javelin are a little more niche. The status effects I'm really not concerned about. Now, from the counter perspective, as we just mentioned, she does have the general reflex ability here. I do think the counter trick's not the worst one either, given that it is a preemptive strike, and it's obviously got a higher chance to activate. So, in a perfect world, I think Silver Wolf Step is the general way to go, but obviously that 15% is drastically reduced when you consider the counter reduction that you're seeing from lots of enemies. Now, the main job, the buffs, she has 2 primarily here. Beacon of Reform is one that we'll see in the AI and auto prioritization. She doesn't utilize as much without some specific tailoring to, but it is a good one. Slash and magic resistance is 25%, attack of 40%. The Spirit of Wazette, though, this next one is really her bread and butter ability that gives her that general barrier of 50% for 3 times. It also gives an effect to herself and allies of restoring AP of 10 when performing a critical hit for 3 turns, which is why I like leaning into the critical hit builds of this, but also increasing the accuracy of 30 for 3 turns for herself and allies. So again, impressively accurate character overall. We get to the offensive abilities and just displaying the ranges and whatnot here on the left. A lot of versatility here. Dispelling Spearflight, although it's got a super long range, is a very destructive ability in that it dispels haste and buffs to the target. Lower modifier ability, but that doesn't really matter. The fact that you can remove a tank buff of hate or dispel what Velos wants to do with haste. Obviously, you don't always want to take him into ice, but Velos isn't a lot of rainbow comps, so you have to still look out for that anyway. Really, really good ability. It's also got some trajectory on it. It's not a line of sight ability, so very versatile. Triple Cross is really the big boy of these abilities. This is a fantastically versatile cross shape ability that dispels courage, has an extra 30% hit chance, again, accuracy out of the roof here, and is a triple hit ability as well. So really, really powerful ability you're going to see used in a majority of instances. The next 2 are also very good though. So Shining Conviction, definitely used less, and these 2 just by the nature of them being a little harder to line up for in terms of how that cross technically works, but they're both piercing abilities, and just a gentle reminder of what that is. It means if there's 2 enemies that are in that AoE area of what's capable of being hit, if she targets the person farther, she will still cleave through the person on the way to hitting them. So it technically functions as kind of like this dual unit attack slash AoE attack, so some nice flexibility. But Shining Conviction is the 30% wind imperil there. It's also a double hit ability, and Spear of Sending is a dispel of auto revive, so anyone using courage or re-raise is absolutely screwed against Glaciela overall. The modifier wise, they only tap out here at 165%. That's totally fine though. The pierce type damage is impactful enough that you don't need to get much higher. But as we move on to the sub job here, this is also a genuinely really good one in my opinion. Wolf's Trail, this one I like a little bit less so, if only because it's got a little higher priority than I would have liked, but it is a versatile one with the extra move and the decrease of AP consumption. But Stalling Spear, I'm really just a big fan of, not even for the slow effect that you see here, but because it gives her another type of AoE to use. Although it's really nice to have those piercing abilities, as you saw, they're a little more limited in what they can hit. Just having a second AoE here, that you don't have to blow all of your triple cross abilities just to hit AoE. You can rely on this one as well. I like that a lot, just to overall save the amount of usages of that former courage removing ability, which is really powerful. But that being said, I almost prefer the Trick Lancer Subjob here. Now again, very limited in its range to some degree, just given that you have to line up perfectly with the characters, but a lot of these have piercing on them as well. I really like this in particular for the Barrier Break Lance, where anyone that wants to at least put on a physical barrier to try to stop her damage, she will absolutely use this ability to do the most damage possible in that instance. Plus, I just like giving her this gluttonous amount of extra abilities to potentially spam for those battles that go on for 2 fights or longer. And finally, the Nightblade Sub, not the worst job either. In particular for the maiming slash, the decreased healing power is a great matchup-specific piece of utility. Obviously, having that slash potential as well certainly helps. I wouldn't lean into this unless, again, very matchup-specific, but it's there. I think it's a useful sub-job. You could do a lot worse. And not for nothing, I'm not a big fan of double resist as an ability because it makes the AI do a lot of weird stuff, but we are getting closer to Pierce and Missile metas. We're already in them, per se. That this is definitely an interesting buff to try to play with as we approach more of that. So again, it's nice to have it there. Now, from the limit break perspective, this is a good limit break, not a great one. This is more PvE oriented, where yes, massive AoE. It is her highest modifier, so it still does a ton of damage, but it's really more about extending the elemental chains, and that's a whole different topic that I'm not going to get into right now. But she will use this regularly in PvP as well, just from the sake of the highest modifier in her kit. But overall, really interesting limit break that gives a nice little throwback to the OG Glaciela in terms of what her limit break did as well. And we look at the mastery ability here. This really got very creative with the extra critical rate of 20 while not making her dexterity through the roof, but they still gave her some crit rate to make up for it. And the pierce attack of 15 obviously is just an extra modifier. So even though I look at those abilities and I say, oh, it's only 165% modifier, well, they're all really 180% modifier because of this mastery ability. So it's more impactful than you might give it credit for. Now we get into the AI and auto prioritization. She does prefer Spirit of Wazette. That's the teammate buff that gives her the shield. Really smart AI, and that's her go-to ability first. The second one here, I used her TMR, is technically this prioritization. I'm sure many TMRs are the same, where she will always prefer Spirit of Wazette and then go TMR second. And the interesting thing about her TMR in particular is that she will use it without teammates nearby. I thought that was very interesting. We'll see in the TMR review that she'll use it on herself and just walk forward with Protect by herself. Totally fine. The third one here is where you get into the sub-job buffs and really want to pick and choose how you prioritize these. All Out Assault is the Trick Lancer. Wolf's Trail is her main job, sub-job, and Double Resist, as we just saw, was the Nightblade. And then finally is the Beacon of Reform. So again, if you really want to get off that slash and magic resist and the attack buff, you're going to have to disable your sub-job buff here or do something with the TMR buff as well. So a lot of different ways to potentially do this, but it is a relatively smart and straightforward AI overall. Now the TMR review, I actually like this TMR a lot. So the stat-wise as a cloth, a little lower on the HP side, obviously. 10 defense, 8 spirit, nothing wrong with that, nothing groundbreaking either. 8 accuracy, basically negligible, but this is another double cast TMR, really powerful, and it grants Protect to herself and allies for 3 turns. And as we've all seen, this is a very actually impactful thing when we see like Joker using it in Dark Meta, when we see Queen Glaciela using it in the Earth comps, that now that anybody can use this Protect teammates ability is super valuable. Overall, this TMR is a definite 2 thumbs up for what it brings to the table. We are seeing more and more Protect Dispel in the game, but still at the end of the day, it's one of the best ways to mitigate damage overall. Now, my general thoughts of the character. Impeccable PvP and PvE unit, loaded with utility. As we've seen, Dispel buffs, Dispel haste, Dispel courage, Dispel re-raise, wind resistance down 30%, chain extension on the limit break, 2 different multi-hits in the main job. That's right down the middle for what you want from a PvP and a PvE character. She is slightly squishy though, with no defense and spirit, but other survivability tools with that 20 AoE resistance, the 50% damage barrier 3 times as well. She also has the vision card of the Chaos Tetrasulfide, which will amplify this survivability. We'll see it in a couple slides here. So it's not that she's slightly squishy, that may be a little overreaction to the words I use there, but you can expose her. She can't block everything. If I had to pick a weakness, it's probably the lack of defense and spirit, but even then, she does more than getting the job done. She doesn't really need the extra survivability. Easy 90 defense penetration potential. That's kind of new here, where she can use that reliably 100% of the time, isn't relying on any buffs or anything for that extra defense penetration. So physical tanks are going to have a very hard time defending against her. She does have excellent attack style versatility too, where we see she's got that blend of trajectory and line of sight for a pierce user. She's got 2 piercing abilities in the main job and 3 of them on the Trick Lancer sub, and a little true AoE limited, as we saw, just the 1 on the main job, but the sub job has it. There's ways to play with it, so I don't consider that a true weakness considering the amount of piercing abilities there are. And finally, statistically very sound, extremely high attack and accuracy. It allows you to gear for all of these defense and spirit things that we consider a weakness for most characters. Usually have to pick bulk or accuracy. You can't do both. Well, she can do both. It's a really, really good thing. Now, finally, the Esper Synergies. There's not a ton of Espers, quite honestly, that really play into what she wants to do. Odin and Dark Odin are 2 of my favorites just for the speed of what they give it, and the Man Killer, some of those resistances between the slash and the missile, the slash and the magic. But Chaos Tetrasulfid, which is coming this week in a couple days, is, in my opinion, the best Esper for her. It is the highest amount of modifiers you can put on there, and the accuracy 22, don't sleep on either. That if you still want to retain the accuracy and take off one of the passives that has it, you can still get it right back with this Esper. And obviously there are other nodes that are really valuable, but my favorite thing about this is that it is also in the mid-80s agility range. You don't sacrifice much off of Odin and Dark Odin for total agility. Now, MAX is just kind of like a subpar version of what these 3 on the left offer, so worth mentioning, but not my favorite. And then Titan and Golem are really more for the bulking perspective, that if you do want to lean into either 15 Spirit or 15 Defense and still have some of those modifiers of Pierce Attack and Man Killer, they both do a really good job of that. So if you're trying to resonate your Espers, you know, any blend of these 6 are really good options to go with. Now look at the weapon optimization. Wind Spear is still the classic one in my opinion. I love this spear just for the 5 agility no matter what. The Pierce Attack 20 is great. I don't have a strong opinion whether to go the Assault or the Critical build for her. I think both have their value. And the same can be said here for the Platinum Lance, where objectively speaking, I think Platinum Lance is roughly equal actually. It just does some things differently. The reduced enemy counter chance, the initial AP of 20 to help her AP management, a little bit less than the Pierce Attack modifier, but the stats on it are relatively similar. I don't think it's a massive change between the 2 of these. I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to whether or not you really want or need that 5 agility here, as opposed to getting it somewhere else. And then finally, the third spear, I think this is really important to keep in mind, the Stoss Spear. Now, there's a handful of ways you can try to defend against Glaciela. Most of them won't work. If you want to go for high defense, she's not going to care about that. She cleaves right through it. If you want to go with a physical barrier, she's got a barrier break. If you want to go for wind resistance, she does technically have a wind resistance in peril. Long story short is there's not many ways to defend against her, but there is one way, and that really is stacking your pierce resistance. She has no innate pierce resistance penetration, which is why I really like the Stoss Spear here, that with this combined with the Truststone, you can get 20% pierce resistance penetration, which is the only thing that could potentially stop her, or at least try to stop her. So keep this one in mind. Now for the TMRs, I like these as well just for the flexibility of gearing. The McLeod and the Valen TMR both offer good things in terms of attack and crit rate. Overall good options if you really want to sub out that TMR spot for one of these so you can have more flexibility on what you're equipping on slots 1 and 2. Now we talk about vision card synergies. Any of the aforementioned here on the screen are going to be great. The Tetrasulfid one though on the left is by far the best. Not only from a stat perspective when you're looking at the 4 agility, the 2 defense, the dexterity and the luck, but she also gets 5 AoE resistance from this, attack 20%, but for the party it's 25 man killer, unit resistance of 15 as well. Really, really important vision card for her to have. Now the other 2, the Christmas card and the Near Automata card, also very, very good. She can use the ability on the winter card here. It gives her the 50% attack, which she's going to benefit greatly from. Same with the HP and crit rate. And the Near Automata card is a really good one too, just giving that extra spirit, which you know she doesn't have, but the crit damage is also really good, where she's going to be a potentially higher critical unit that's going to amplify her damage significantly. Now, in addition to those 3, there are others. Golden Armament is a really good one here. You get the extra unit resistance, the HP, magic resistance, attack, and dexterity, all great things up and down that card. Downtime is a good matchup specific card. Still keep that AoE resistance of 10. HP and the slash resistance here. And then finally, the regular Tetrasulfid, that wind attack 35 is definitely still a very, very strong modifier overall. So a lot of vision cards for you to pick from, which finally brings us to the Truststone recommendations. On the left side, no surprise, HP, defense and spirit and luck as appropriate. Same thing for the right side. This is almost repetitive at this point. Agility, AP and attack, and then crit rate are also great. I prefer HP and agility personally on the top, but if you've seen my video on the left side Truststones, I will definitely be using defense and spirit ones as well for gearing flexibility for her. And then right side, I do prefer the agility, just because I've never seen a scenario where agility isn't the best one unless you're specifically trying to get down a certain turn order. her. Now for passives on the left side, nothing surprising here either. HP 10%, luck 10%, crit of 815. The rest of it is matchup specific. But the right side, there are a couple I think you should try to lean into. The attack 20% is a definite must. The acquired AP 20%, I like it. Not necessarily a must, but worth mentioning. The last four here, though, I'm big fans of. The crit rate and crit damage, just making sure that you're doing everything you can to punish enemies with the crit damage. But then finally here, the pierce resistance penetration of 10, you're going to want that at all times just to get through what the enemy resistances might have. But the wind attack 10, obviously super impactful as well. So any blend of these 6 on the right, I think you're going to get good value out of. And that is the Flagbearer Glaciela review in a nutshell. This is an exceptionally good character. She will last for quite some time here through a variety of future metas as well. She's a unit that I do think you could probably slot into a handful of different rainbow teams just for the sake of having that courage and re-raise removal, the triple hits, the dispel and whatnot, and the fact that she's kind of self-sufficient, that she does give herself her own survivability with the barrier. The pierce attack is relatively unmitigated by most kinds of resistances. That, yeah, I have nothing but good things to say about her, and I'm really looking forward to using her a lot more in the coming weeks. So thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll talk to y'all soon.